Brian, we hear filmmakers say that filmmaking keeps them out of trouble, or they say, you know, this is all I can do. This is why I do it, even though it's hard at times. Sometimes I wonder, is it really all they can do, or that's just what they sort of say to themselves? That's what they want to do. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm sure it varies for each filmmaker. I mean, for me, I can do other things, but what I find happens is if I don't do something creative, and for me, my creativity seems to always go visual, so it always goes into movies. If a certain amount of time passes and I haven't done something, I start to go a little crazy, a little stir crazy. So there's like this drive to, for me, it's a drive to tell stories. And then eventually I write a lot, and I write a lot of stories. And usually the story we end up doing with my filmmaking partner, Lo, is usually one that I've had for a while that I keep coming back to, or won't go away. Like it won't, sometimes I'll be able to write something and it's kind of done. Even though it's like never gonna see the light of day, maybe it's a script or a story or just an idea, I can get it out of my system and it feels like, okay, I'm okay. But every now and then there's a story that I keep thinking about it. It comes back and comes back and comes back. And usually that's the one where it's like, I have to do this one. You know, find a way to make it in a format that other people can see it, you know.
Is there sort of a time frame for you? Like if you're in between projects, is there like a 3-month window where if you don't have something new to work on, you can start to feel yourself slipping, so to speak?
I mean, I'm always like thinking of ideas. So it's like, I would say it's longer than a 3-month window for me. As long as I'm like collecting my ideas and thinking about stories and writing it down, I'm fine. I think it's like, if it's like going up to a year and I'm not actively involved in making a movie or making some other creative project, which will come to fruition so other people can see it, then I probably get the shakes almost. It's like, I have to do it. You know, I have to do something.
Yeah. What do you start to see yourself slipping into when you know, like, do you become bored easily, or how do you know, like, oh, you know what this is? After a while you learn, this is because I need to start working on something.
You know, for me, it's like really, I just kind of get into a malaise. It's like, it's like doing something creative is kind of what makes me feel alive. And if too much time goes by and I'm not doing something creative, it's just, I don't know, I find myself kind of sinking into this like malaise of just life isn't really working for me. And then I'm like, what's wrong? And I'm like, and then it kind of hits me like, oh, because I'm not doing something creative. So amazingly, I forget every time. And I'm like, why am I feeling this way? And then it's like, oh, it's because I'm not creatively involved in something. Fortunately, I have a lot of other things that I do, which are also creative, so that helps me kind of sustain it a little bit. But for me, it's like the projects I'm most passionate about are the ones that my wife and filmmaking partner, Laurence Lowe, that we do together. And those are the ones, because it's our project and it's a passion project. So we kind of control it from beginning, middle, and end. So it's very much like our vision of what we want to tell. And that is, to me, the most creatively satisfying, is when you can do a project like that, where it's not going to have too much outside influence that changes what you're trying to make.
What other creative things do you do?
I do editing. So I do editing for television series, television shows, which obviously involves a lot of creativity. I do a lot of like reality type shows, which actually requires you as an editor to be very involved in story, because you're working with the story people and the producers to help figure out the story and develop. So it's like, it's more than just cutting something from a script. It really engages you creatively, because you're really working on figuring out like, well, how do we tell the story? What is the story? Sometimes you're figuring out, well, you know, what is this? You know, what is the story? And how do you tell a beginning, middle, and end and make it dramatic and keep people engaged with it?
All right. Yeah, I heard an author speak this weekend, a Brazilian author, and forgive me on her name, I'll put it at the below the line part of the video. But she said that when she gets writer's block, and she says it's very real, that she has to do things like go to museums, just you know, other creative things that are not writing. Do you ever feel blocked? And if so, do you have ways to get out of it?
Well, I definitely feel like going places, like Lo and I like taking trips and going places. We like to go out to the desert or to the mountains, sometimes up to the beach or the ocean. It's like, I get a lot of inspiration from locations. Especially with movies, and it gets a little tricky sometimes, because sometimes I fall so in love with the location, it's hard for me to imagine not shooting it there. But there'll be usually a location can be a really big inspiration for me. Like I'll see something and then it starts my mind going, what if, what if, what if? There's been places that we've incorporated in our films. Sometimes it's not that exact same location, but like an idea from that location will find its way into the story, something inspired by. So I find like the best way for me, at least creatively, is to find the inspiration from real life. Because if you don't do that, then I feel like you get into a cycle of copying, which is really easy to fall into. I mean, it's really easy to look at a movie and go, oh, I like that movie, but I would have done something like this with that movie. And then, you know, you can easily change it a few degrees and it be a new movie, but in essence, it's going to be so built on the other film that it's not really a new thing. Whereas if you can get the inspiration from life or stories you hear from other people, like real stories that happened to them, or they know of a friend, something happened, a lot of times that can spark the imagination into thinking like, oh, well, you know, what if that story happened and then this happened and then that happened? And to me, that's the most fun. It's kind of like taking that inspiration from real life.
Is location ever a character in any of your films? I know you do
sure.
mostly horror.
Yes. I would say location for us is almost always a character, and almost every film we've done, I think it's funny because this film, Dark Remains, I forget, this is the Polish version, but anyway,
okay, yeah.
This is Dark Remains. A location that Laurence Lowe found as I was writing the script. She fell in love with this like prison location that was in Rome, Georgia, which is no longer in existence, but it was a closed prison. But we could actually go there and shoot. And she's like, well, you have to add a prison to the story because this prison's so great. I'm like, well, there's no way to put a prison in the story. But anyway, after like complaining for a while, I woke up the next day and I'm like, oh, well, if this prison became part of the story like this, it changed everything and it made it better. I mean, it rippled through, and the prison became such a thing. Like when it came out in Japan, they're like, they retitled it Ghost Prison. And like, you know, none of these things are in the movie, but it's not even the prison that's in the movie. But they like to do this with clip art and change the graphics when it goes overseas. But they decided they loved the prison so much, the movie title became Ghost Prison. So definitely like locations become like a huge thing. This film, which was our second film, Ghost of the Needle, which they retitled Asphyxia, I think in Spain. That one, a factory, is a very key location for the main character, and a lot of the events take place in the factory. And that became like a very key part to the film. And once we found the factory, we did a lot of revisions on the script and writing because the location inspired us. Because I had other things in the script, but once you see the real factory, you're like, oh, well, this could happen, and this could happen, and there was an elevator there. There's this amazing freight elevator that was there, and that added like this whole thing with going between the different floors. And so like for me, it's like locations, including the first film we did, Freezer, was our first film. And this actually took place on what was the family farm that I spent a lot of time on growing up. I was in Virginia, right across the border from Tennessee. Oh. And I spent a lot of childhood years and weekends and weeks on this farm. And that location was like, it basically was the script, because I basically, once I came up with a story and realized it was happening here, it like you would go, well, the characters here and the characters in the situations, what would happen? Because there are these things in that location. So once you bring in your protagonists and your antagonists and you go, well, what would they do? And then based on being in this environment, and then you basically get scenes and you get moments, and it actually influences the writing of the script. And I find that, I don't know, I find that very exciting. When your location can actually be when the location that inspires the story can actually be the one that you shoot at, that's the best. I mean, it doesn't always work out because you maybe can't, for practical reasons, shoot at that location. But that's the best case scenario. Otherwise, whenever you do get the real location, you kind of have to embrace it and make changes instead of trying to fight it to be the location you don't have, because that'll work against you. But location, definitely a character. Yeah.